Welcome to the 9th episode of the End Time Study. Is this the end? Please consider watching the first 8 episodes as they provide an overview and details which complement this video. If you'd like notes of the video, which includes some fill in the blanks, please download these by selecting the link located in the description below this video. Let's continue our study of Daniel 7 now. We were in Daniel 7, verses 13 to 20 last episode. Let's briefly review what was covered in the last video. Daniel had a vision, and sees someone like the Son of Man. This one, described as the Son of Man, coming in the clouds, received his final authority and dominion over all things, by the Ancient of Days, and is the stone we saw in Daniel 2, which crushes the fourth kingdom. Yahshua is currently seated at the right hand of the Father, awaiting that day when the kingdom will be handed over to him, and all people, nations, and languages, will serve him. Yahweh's saints also receive the kingdom with Yahshua. Daniel is alarmed as he learns that when this little horn arises, he will bring a 3.5 year period of great tribulation. He asks an angel what this all means, and beginning in verse 17, he receives a literal interpretation. We learn that the 4 beasts that came out of the sea in verse 3, are 4 kings who have kingdoms. Daniel's focus was on the 4th beast, which was terrifying, dreadful, and exceedingly strong. The 10 horns mentioned in chapter 7 are same as the 10 toes in chapter 2, and the beast with 10 horns, wearing 10 crowns in the book of Revelation. Out of these 10 horns, a little horn arises. This little horn, or anti-Messiah, has a nation, a global system including politics, economics, and an apostate religion. He rules for 3.5 years, commonly referred to of the Great Tribulation. There are many views on who these 10 horns are, however we covered 3. The first view is a group of 10 countries that evolved from a large migration of Goths, often labeled barbarians. The second view considered the 10 Western European Union full members, or possibly 10 countries that are currently on a wait list. The third and final view involves the 5 kingdoms that ruled the world prior to the Roman Empire. These 5 were actually ruled by 10 different kingships. While many of these kingships don't exist today, it is known where they reside. Currently they are lying dormant, however perhaps these 10 kingdoms will revive in the end days. We left off in the last video covering possibilities of who the 10 horns could be. If you have not watched the previous video on verses 13 to 20, please do so for additional details on these 3 views. Also in verse 20, we see the other horn with eyes and a mouth, referred to as the anti-Messiah, or the beast in Revelation 13 verses 1 to 10. We will cover this little horn, or anti-Messiah, soon, but let's first review verses 21 to 28 as there are few details which will help in explaining the various views of the little horn. For those who may be new to the channel, I use Hebrew names and titles such as Elohim for God, Yahweh for the Lord, and Yahshua for Jesus, just to name a few. If you have questions, please see the introduction videos for additional details. We'll be covering quite a few verses in this video, so let's begin. Daniel 7 verse 21 says, "As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them." We see confirmation of this in Revelation 13 verse 7, which says, "It was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him." So we see this little horn will not only make war against the saints and overcome them, but he will also have authority over the whole world. And we'll learn even more in verse 25 shortly. Daniel 7 verse 22 says, "Until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom." The key word in verse 22 is until. Until marks the end of the earthly beast kingdoms. So in verse 21, while we see tough times and death ahead for the saints, it all ends here in verse 22, once the Ancient of Days comes. Who is this Ancient of Days? We see this label used 3 times in all of Scripture, and all are here in Daniel 7. Daniel 7 verses 9 to 10 says, "As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat, his clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool, his throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him, 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, the court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. We see the Son of Man, or Yahshua, has a similar description to the Ancient of Days in Revelation 1 verses 13 to 15. Revelation 1 verses 13 to 15 says, "And in the midst of the lampstands one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire, his feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters." Daniel 7 verses 9 to 10 looks to be referring to Yahweh, as he is on his throne in heaven and judgment is taking place. We determined in a previous episode that the judgment referred to here seems to be that of the beast, who we see in verse 11 first speaking, and then receiving his judgment. Daniel 7 verse 11 says, "I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire." And again in verses 13 and 14 we see that one like a son of man, coming with the clouds, came to the Ancient of Days. He was given his earthly kingdom, now that the little horn, or beast, and the kingdoms were judged. Daniel 7 verses 13 to 14 says, "I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed." And here in Daniel 7 verse 22, which is part of the interpretation of Daniel's vision, we see confirmation of what happened in verses 9 to 14. Verse 22 says the Ancient of Days came. This is a direct reference to Yahshua's return, as the Ancient of Days gives dominion and final authority to the Son of Man, at which time his earthly kingdom is set up. Something else we see in verse 22 is that judgment was given for the saints, and they possessed the kingdom along with the king, as we previously saw in verses 18. Just a quick reminder, if you would like to be notified when a new video is posted, please subscribe to the channel and then select the bell notification. Let's continue our study, picking up with verse 23. Daniel 7 verse 23 says, "Thus he said, As for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces." This verse matches verses 7 and 19, but includes additional details, such as the beast is the fourth kingdom and it will devour the whole earth. Here a fourth kingdom, different from all others, will devour the whole earth, and break it in pieces. This implies a universal dynasty, one that would subject the whole world to its power and government. The fourth kingdom is identified historically as Rome, as it conquered all four heads of the winged leopard. The winged leopard symbolized Alexander the Great's Grecian Empire, which was divided into four at his death. Revelation 13 verses 7 to 8 says of the beast, or little horn, also it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. Note, the King James Bible says him, instead of it. So is this beast a man, or an empire? It is believed to be both, actually. First, we know it has to be a man because his number is that of a man. We see this in Revelation 13 verse 18, which says, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666 or 666. So it is a man, but it is also a kingdom, or empire over which this man rules. As we learned previously, horns are kings, and kings have kingdoms. So this beast, or little horn, is a king, with a kingdom. Both will be merged into a beast that is worshipped. Revelation 13 verses 7-8 says all will worship it, or him, except those whose names are written in the book of life, as the end of verse 8 mentions. The anti-Messiah will try to replicate the true Messiah. Let's look at two examples. First, the Messiah will have followers on whose foreheads are inscribed the Father's name. We see this in Revelation 14 verse 1, which says of the 144,000 from the 12 tribes of Israel, "And I looked, and, lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads." Interestingly, we see in Deuteronomy 6 verses 5-8 a reference to those that keep his commands being bound upon their hand and on their foreheads. Deuteronomy 6 verses 5-8 says, "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim is one sovereign, and thou shalt love Yahweh thy Elohim with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words, which I command thee this day, shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes." The anti-Messiah will try to be like the Most High by forcing all to receive his mark in their forehead or in their right hand, or they will not be able to buy or sell. Revelation 13 verses 16-17 says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." Second, they both receive worship. We see Yahshua is worthy of worship over and over in Scripture. However, we see Revelation 5 verse 13 says, "And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea, and all that is in them, saying, To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever." The anti-Messiah will demand worship. We saw an example of this earlier in the verse, which stated people will have to accept the mark of the beast in order to buy or sell. Revelation 13 verse 4 also says, "And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" This little horn from the fourth kingdom, better known as the Roman Empire, has not controlled the entire world or all its people to date, and is therefore yet to come. Daniel 7 verse 24 says, "As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them, he shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings." Verse 24 matches with verses 8 and 20, however verse 24 says that out of the fourth kingdom, 10 kings will arise first, with 1 more to arise after. Then, 3 will be put down, subdued, or humbled. As seen in earlier passages, the 10 kings are identified as reigning at the same time, not in succession or sequential order. Daniel 7 verses 7-8 says, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and, behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and, behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. After the little horn, or beast came up from the 10, it plucked up 3 of them." And the 10 horns in Daniel 7 are same as the 10 toes in Daniel 2. Daniel 2 verses 40-44 says, "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the Elohim of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. We see at the end of this interpretation it says, in the days of these kings. Notice kings is plural. It does not say, this king. Therefore, these are kings, including the little horn, or beast kingdom, when Elohim comes to set up the final kingdom. And Revelation 17 verses 12 to 13 says, "And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast." This too implies there will be 10 kings, or kingdoms reigning at the same time, together with the beast, or little horn, which will only have their authority for a brief time and will hand over that authority to the beast. Daniel 7 verse 25 says, "He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time." Verse 8 and 21 previously mentioned what we see here in verse 25, however we see something new in the progressions. Verse 8 only mentioned a mouth speaking great things. Verse 21 adds, "Not only did he speak great things, but he made war with the saints, and prevailed against them." Then here in verse 25, Daniel says not only will he speak great words against the Most High and wear out the saints of the Most High, but he'll also think to change times and laws, and he will have 3.5 years to do these things. One view of this little horn's attempt to change the law lies in the law of death. Yahweh says in Ezekiel 18 verses 20 to 21, "The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father, nor the father suffer for the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. But if a wicked person turns away from all his sins that he has committed, and keeps all my statutes and does what is just and right, he shall surely live, he shall not die." We see Satan's approach to death in Genesis 3 verses 4 to 5, which says, "But the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die. For Elohim knows that when you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil." Ever since the garden, Satan, the father of lies, has told mankind through society and religion, that we will not die and go to hell as long as we are basically good. However, Scripture is clear, as we saw in Ezekiel. The result of sin, even one, is death. But if a wicked person turns away from all his sins that he has committed, and keeps all Yah's statutes and does what is just and right, he shall surely live, he shall not die. Spiritually. Another view is this could refer to Yahweh's biblical feasts, or appointed times, and the law, or commandments. The beast may think he can change Yahweh's appointed feast times and his laws, however the little horn, or anti-Messiah, does not have the authority to make it officially happen. We will cover more on this view later when we discuss the little horn ideas. The changing of times and laws could be a combination of both views, or perhaps something else. It is most likely based on Scripture. A new type of legal system will be instituted by this little horn. And any opposition of the little horn, or his policies, will be seen as treason, punishable by death. Finally, we see at the end of verse 25 that the little horn, or beast, will have power over the saints for a time, times, and half a time, or 3.5 years. We see this as follows. Time equals 1. Times equals 2. Half a time equals 0.5. For a total of 3.5 years. We see confirmation: a time, times, and half a time is years, and not some other unit of measure in Revelation 12 verse 14, which uses the same terminology. It says, "But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, and times, and half a time." So here we see, time, times, and half a time used. And we see a few verse earlier in Revelation 12 verse 6 it says, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by Elohim, in which she is to be nourished for 1260 days. This is the same event told in separate verses, and we see from both that 1260 days is the same as 3.5 years, considering the Jewish year consists of 360 days. 3.5 years times 360 days equals 1260 days. This time, times, and half a time, or 1260 days, or 3.5 years, is the same period Yahshua refers to as the Great Tribulation. Matthew 24 verse 21 says, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be." And this great tribulation begins immediately after the abomination of desolation, covered in Matthew 24 verse 15, which says, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." We're near the end now. Let's continue with verse 26. Daniel 7 verse 26 says, "But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end." In verse 26, we see repeated details of verses 10 and 22. Judgment happens, most likely referring to the anti-Messiah, or beast judgment. The verse ends with saying his dominion is taken away and he is cast into the lake of fire. We see this more in detail in Revelation 19 verses 19 to 20, which says, "And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him who was sitting on the horse and against his army. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur." Daniel 7 verse 27 says, "And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, his kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him." We can see verse 27 contains many of the same details as verses 14, 18, and 22. We see the world's fourth kingdom consumed, and the transition to the fifth and final kingdom. This final and everlasting kingdom shall be given to the saints of Yahweh, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. We see here in verse 27 that the millennial kingdom is received by the saints, not achieved by them. The church does not convert the world to Yahshua's kingdom and give it back to him. Yahweh gives it to them. Paul reminds us of this in Romans 8 verses 16 to 17, which says, "The Ruach himself bears witness with our Ruach that we are children of Elohim, and if children, then heirs, heirs of Elohim and fellow heirs with Messiah, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him." And finally, Daniel 7 verse 28 says, "Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart." Here in verse 28, Daniel states the interpretation of the dream is over, and he was awestruck by what he saw. While trying to understand all of it, although troubled, he believed it was true. Imagine Daniel, having a vision of the future and seeing the interpretation. Seeing what was going to happen to his people, and the world. Seeing and hearing this little horn blaspheme the Elohim of heaven and rule the entire world. And then he sees this same beast make war with the saints and prevail over them. And he is seeing this all in the future tense. Why means he is seeing the world as it is now, back in the time he was alive. This would be mind-blowing. And it was. But he knew that after all this, Yahweh wins. This concludes chapter 7. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new and pray you are enjoying this end-time study. The purpose of these videos is to share the importance of Bible prophecy, to encourage others to study Yah's Word, and to be prepared for the end times. And Revelation begins and ends with a blessing. It is vital we not define the Bible by our lives or views, but rather define our lives and views by the Bible. I encourage you when studying not to allow man's doctrine, or preconceived biases to supersede Scripture, as we're reminded in Isaiah 29 verse 13, Colossians 2 verse 8, and elsewhere. Information shared throughout this video contain ideas and perspectives based on studies and should not be considered 100% accurate. Please continue studying and being like the Bereans by verifying videos and books you watch and read, including this one, to ensure they line up with Scripture. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel. My plan is to post a new video every couple weeks or earlier if time allows. I feel so honored and blessed to share what I have been shown in my studies, and I appreciate you watching. I am so grateful for your prayers and support of this ministry and pray you too are blessed.